Welcome to Thinkin Bros. I'm Chris.
And I'm Alex.
We're your favorite corner store philosophers trying to figure out life one conundrum at a time. Today, we're going to be going off script a little bit by letting ChatGPT generate our prompt, and we're going to be talking about happiness. Obviously, a cheesy subject for any philosophy podcast, but we had to get to it, and here we are. So, I'd like to start, and this is the first point ChatGPT gives us anyway, defining happiness. Could you tell us a few words about how you define happiness?
I think like a first step and a smart distinction to make is between happiness and pleasure, right? I think every philosophy makes it, even hedonism. Most forms of hedonism have a distinction between just pleasure and do they?
I don't know because
Oh,
when you always
yeah,
bring up hedonistic utilitarianism, it's always the value system is defined by pleasure,
right.
and that's everything that matters in this entire universe. So I don't think they
Okay,
think.
well maybe I'm letting slip my disagreement with hedonism then, because I'm more of the opinion that there is a distinction between pleasure and happiness. Pleasure can be defined as the feeling you get when you do pleasurable things, simply, right? Eating good food, doing activities you like, stuff like that, but that don't necessarily bring you happiness long term. Happiness, I would define more as something that's sustainable over a long time. And for example, for me specifically, I'm happy when I'm productive. But being productive often means doing displeasurable things. So there's not there's definitely not a direct correlation between pleasure and happiness.
And in fact, it seems to me, I'm sure it's going to be the subject at the depth of our discussion, but it seems to me as though a life with not a single bit of pleasure can be a happy life, right? I'm sure there are some Socratic examples. Maybe the slave who has to get up every day, a boring routine, a physically hard routine, and as long as maybe, well, again, we're going to define happiness, but as long as the criteria to happiness are fulfilled in his life, he can lead a happy life without a single bit of pleasure, right?
I'm not so sure, because I think there's pleasure to be found in everything too. I think, let's say, a slave is maybe a different situation, but even someone whose life isn't going that well can find pleasure in literally just existing with his family or something, right? Just there are some basic things that offer pleasure.
Yeah, but if you're trying to set up an example like I did
Right.
to, verify the independence of happiness and pleasure,
Hmm.
and then you're saying, well, he has a family. Well, okay, how about a person who doesn't have a family?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Then the slave, to survive, he eats, right? So maybe his
Love the
breadcrumbs every
stew. Love me the
the stew. Yeah, yeah. The one
cabbage stew,
breadcrumb.
cabbage stew and mold bread. Okay, sure. Let's move on. I definitely have a few points and a way of defining happiness, but I don't think it's very productive to just lay it out, all out at the beginning. So maybe let's move on to the second point of the prompt. Pursuit of happiness. Is happiness something that can be actively pursued, or does it come naturally as a byproduct of other life experiences? Explore the concept of actively seeking happiness versus allowing it to unfold.
Mm.
So maybe we answer the specific question. Is happiness an active thing or no?
I think it isn't. I think the way I think of it and define it, it shouldn't be. Well, I don't know if like that's exactly the question. If it's in, well, what I think is that it shouldn't be an active pursuit. You shouldn't actively pursue happiness, because honestly, that's the way to not get it. I think um,
Counter argument, Will Smith movie, Pursuit of Happiness.
I
It's
am
kind of in a title.
I am defeated. I can stop
All
talking
right, but
now.
do go on.
Um, I think that, yeah, especially the way I see it, my happiness comes from, I guess, meaning and being useful in society and in for the people in my life. I'm not pursuing happiness per se, the feeling of fulfillment that's mixed in with happiness for me. I'm not pursuing that. I'm just doing the things I think are right. and happiness ensues from that, I definitely don't think it's an active pursuit of happiness that should take priority.
I see. I definitely think pursuing happiness directly, especially because it's so loosely defined usually and so mistaken for pleasure, usually, that yeah, the pursuit of happiness itself will not lead anywhere. Especially because if I were to ask you, right, if you were misled in your understanding of happiness, and I were to say, well, okay, how are you going to find this happiness? What would be the things you even name?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think because I guess I don't know how you're going to define it, but I don't have a definition of happiness. I think it's just something that from time to time you think about your life and you're like, yeah, things are going pretty well, or something like it's that sort of feeling where you're like, I'm happy with my life, right? I'm just happy, but it's not something for me. It's not something I pursued, and since it's not something I can define, if I try to define it and try to pursue it, I'm just going to be doing something specific, but that's something specific is probably not the definition of happiness as it is in reality because I can't find the real definition and I would be pursuing something else and would end up not happy.
Yeah, yeah. There's something to be said. There's this concept in philosophy called autotelism, and it's the fact that you do things for their own purpose, right? Let's say you start going to the gym, and I think what it posits is if you can name a reason except for going to the gym for going to the gym, you are kind of misled in your endeavor, and it will not lead to happiness. I think it's an approximation of what that means, right? If you say to me, I want to, you know, fix my body dysmorphia issues, right? My insecurities. Well, all right, that's already a misleading thing because you're seeking external validation. If your diet is too hard or your progress is going too slow, you're going to stop. But when you pursue something autotelically, therefore, I go to the gym because I like going to the gym. I go to the gym to go to the gym. And that can be anything, right? A walk in the park. Well, are you burning calories? Because you're not going to enjoy your walk in the park if you have the specific intent of burning calories. But if you're there for it, right? For the trees, for the, well, even then, obviously, if you're not in a park and you're on a treadmill, you're not going to enjoy it. But I don't know. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I definitely agree too. I think I've been on both sides of the equation with the gym of going for a specific purpose, or I think just in general at the beginning, it's hard to justify going to the gym because at the beginning, I think you don't have a choice but to go for a reason, right? When you're young and you're a guy, you go to get bigger, and then you don't get big fast enough. You don't really know what to do. You're lost. You're one of the first friends to go to the gym, so you don't get advice for someone from someone that's more experienced. You're kind of lost, and you're going there not just to go to the gym and I don't know, just general things like learning and spending time doing something good in your life. You're going for specific goals, and that messes it up sort of. But then later, I had a period where, well, I'm sort of still in that period where I go to the gym where I work out just for the sake of it. And I think you get into it at the beginning for a reason, as I said. Maybe you're going with friends and it sort of smooths the experience. And then you're just in the routine of going and you don't really notice it, but you're doing something good for your life and you're not even noticing the time flying by. It's just in your routine. And I think that's part of happiness too, is like not seeing the time fly by because you're doing something meaningful.
Yeah, maybe there's something. Maybe we can determine certain aspects of happiness during our talk. Because if I were to point out one, it seems as though maybe, well, if you accept everything we've said for now, you need to implement things that aren't necessarily at the beginning going to be pleasurable to you. Okay, so that's one thing. For example, going to the gym. Maybe you even seek an external purpose. Okay, but your number one priority as soon as you start going to the gym, for example, is to further yourself from that initial external purpose. Let's say a kid who learns to brush his teeth, right? At the beginning, I mean, I don't have specific memories, but I'm sure you're like, well, I just want to go to sleep. Why do I have to go through this thing, this thing? My teeth hurt. Maybe you have a sensitive enamels, and at a certain point, let's say now, you wake up and it. Well, first of all, your mouth probably feels disgusting, so you are gonna do it. So it seems as though you're doing it for an external purpose, but also my mornings feel kind of off because it's something that I've implemented for multiple years. So if we were to take that, it's not a deep example and it's not very revelatory for happiness, but if we were to apply it everywhere, if you were to build a perfect day for yourself, right? Imagine yourself in a perfect day. You wake up early as you planned. You do your little routine, right? You drink your water, your coffee. You start being productive from the very beginning. You go to work. It's a perfect work day. You make this interaction. You go home. Instead of just laying on the couch, you go directly to the gym. You spend some quality time with some quality people, and then you go to sleep early. Have a good night of sleep. Let's say that's something that will make you happy, right? We haven't determined many aspects of happiness, but let's say that's what it would take. Maybe you're a simple person, and that would be cool. To do that, you would simply have to force yourself to not stay on your phone too late and go to sleep the night before at the right time, right? You would have to force yourself to be the person who wakes up early, right? In the beginning, if you were to imagine your perfect day, I think the thing that separate you from that perfect day are things that you have to forcefully incorporate, right? I'm going to quote a great philosopher who said, do what you want to do. Okay. And that was Alex, actually.
Facts.
Credits to Alex. And it's about doing what is not pleasurable to you right now, but will eventually pay off, right? It's always, I use the following technique. Sorry for hoarding the mic, but I use the following technique. It's the year from now approach. If you were to look back at your life 1 year from now, what do you want to have accomplished? And if you let that thought guide every single day of your year, you're going to get there. If you are going to look at tomorrow you and ask yourself, what would I have liked to accomplish today? And you do that exact thing, not what is pleasurable to you, what you should have done, right? For example, we don't want to record this episode right now, but when we get to posting the episode, it would be very fortuitous for us to have recorded it today, right? We both didn't want to do this, so I think that's how I see it.
Yeah, I think what I feel we're getting at, maybe we're arriving at this conclusion, is that it's very ominous and sort of philosophical as we are, but happiness, it seems, is having maybe not a routine, maybe just things you do throughout your day, throughout the week. You have a set of things that you like to do or that you need to do, and you've done them for a while. You It's not effortful anymore. You're in the flow of things, but you do everything you need, right? If you like eating good food, that's part of your week. You don't overthink it. If you go to the gym, you're not stressing with the gym saying, "Oh no, I need to lose 5 pounds in the next 2 weeks, or else I haven't achieved my goals." You're just going to the gym. You're going to work because it's a work you find meaningful. You're spending time with your friends because that's something you enjoy, and you're not thinking about it. It feels like happiness is about getting lost in not getting lost, but maybe structuring in the beginning and then sort of going with the flow of things and feeling secure with how you're spending your time and just sort of doing all the time activities that you know are right, not overthinking it, and you don't even see the time pass because you're happy with what you've chosen to do with your life.
I think we should spend a little bit more time on before we kind of take it for granted what I said about autotelism. I think, the way I always justify, because I truly deeply believe it's to be true, but the way I justify it is that external reasons for doing something are fleeting, right? If you want to make more money to impress someone, well, that someone might end up not being impressed, right? Or that someone may lose importance in your life by the time you do get the money. There are a million ways to render every external reason for doing something fleeting. But on the other hand, what if you what if that person is important up to that point for you? And what if they are impressed by you having made that money? What if you did lose a bunch of pounds and your goal was simply to impress everyone around you, and you did by showing off how well your fitness journey worked out, right? What if that does happen? Does it lead to happiness in the same way, coincidentally, than doing it autotelically? Because doing it autotelically means going to the gym because you want to go to the gym. Well, by going to the gym, you will always have gone to the gym. You will always get what you want out of any activity. But with external reasons, that's unsure. But when it is a hit, right? When it does fulfill your wants, your needs, does that provide the same value as doing something autotelically?
Well, thank you for playing devil's advocate, but I think it's the fleetingness of it that defeats your sort of little argument that you said. Because yes, okay, it so happens that that person is impressed by money. In that specific situation, the things you've done did bring you the reward you were seeking. But I think what happens in the long term is that over a wide enough set of situations, over a long enough period of time, let's say losing weight in the gym, right? You lost you lost 20 pounds and it shows and people are happy, whatever. People are not people are not going to be happy forever, or the fact that you've done it for other people means that you've achieved that reward. But I feel like you shouldn't lose weight for people, and it's not sustainable in your life. So even though losing weight for people's approval, and you do get their approval, you get a reward. But over time, let's say you'll regain that weight, or people won't be impressed anymore, and you stop losing that reward. And so uh, the absence of intrinsic reward just shows in the long term. That's why people say, like, you know, there is a reward in drinking alcohol and having fun and partying, but it is fleeting, because then you realize, oh wait, I haven't really done anything with my life. From time to time, it's enjoyable, but over a long enough period of time, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, and this actually brings me to my interest in doing an episode on drugs, because my argument is always, well, yes, you're having fun, but it's not real fun, right? That's not the reality we live in. That's not the reality we're born in and we're set to operate in. You're living in a parallel reality, and in that reality, you are having fun, but it's not real. But the problem with that is, if you can just keep up your drug addiction for a long enough time, lest it be lethal, you can just kind of, I don't know how to justify. Okay, well, yeah, you brought up some
If
good points, but
if that's an episode we're gonna do, maybe we should keep it for the episode.
yeah, of course. But what I was gonna say relates to both topics, and it's the following: it's the time. Okay, I'm gonna rethink about what you said, but I just don't find it convincing. The time. Oh yeah, you're right, you're right. Okay, so what we've determined is that even when an external reason for doing something works out, well, the moment, let's say it like this, the moment it does work out, it goes away. But, and this is one of the points I would like us to enforce, happiness must be of something long term, or continuous, maybe we would call it, right? A continuous effort, long term things create more happiness than short term things, is what I'd like to posit right now. But the moment you achieve a goal, and external reasons are always goals, right? They always have a limit date because they can end, right? I mean, if you set them, I mean, that's the thing again. If you set to impress someone and you do impress them, what if you just continue your fitness journey for like 10 years, and every year you do get better and that person is impressed for those 10 years? I don't know. I'd like to definitively rule out the validity of external. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. I guess what I would say is that it likely won't happen, right? The maybe the first high is that you're never going to get a high as the first one, right? When you, let's say you're fat and you lose that initial amount of weight, and people are very impressed. They see you for the first time and they're like, "Wow, you were hiding this amazing chiseled jawline under all that fat," and they're impressed for the first time a lot, and then you're like, you're very rewarded by that, so you're sort of motivated, even though it's from external reward. You're motivated to continue and, let's say, to go to the gym and get your body better. But then people are going to be less impressed, and every time your progress is going to get slower because that's how the gym works, and they're going to be less and less impressed. And I don't know if there is that sort of relationship that you value that much, that I don't know, that people are going to be around long enough to see all your progress and be impressed every time. And if there is, then maybe that's your like significant other, and the meaning doesn't come from, just random people's approval. It comes from a connection with someone, and that's happiness because it's long term and it's a relationship you have with the other person. I've sort of gone astray, but yeah.
Okay, so the way I would say it right now, the way I see it, is what we've determined and what is certain right now is that autotelicity is both constant and unlimited, because you will never, not have gone to the gym by having gone to the gym. You understand what I'm saying?
Facts.
But whatever you do for external reasons is both fluctuating and limited, or I would say, right? Okay, if you're gonna get that approval,
Yeah.
it's gonna be bigger sometimes, smaller sometimes. Now, the limited part, I understand, right? Let's say you lose a certain person you did something for, right? You wanted to gain the money, to impress someone in your life, and then that person isn't in your life anymore. Okay, that there's something inherently less valuable about that aspect of external reasons, the limited aspect, okay? But the variable one, I mean, maybe it's maybe we would label it as uncertainty and not,
You,
yeah,
you know
maybe
what a good
uncertainty.
example is? I think a good example is celebrity. When people get famous, they have a lot of people admiring them, giving them the social approval they need so much. And for some people, it continues their whole life, and I guess it's sustainable. Maybe that's their version of happiness. Um, but you see famous people that do like one wrong thing, and the public turns against them, and it ruins their whole life. And I don't know, they get depressed because all along, what felt like something stable and long term was based on other people and based on opinions that can change, people that don't know you very much. And I think maybe that's proof of concept that other people's approval is not something that you should base your happiness on. It can be, maybe it can even work, right? Celebrities that are loved throughout their whole careers, maybe that's a version of happiness. That's not one I would want, but what you're looking for a normal person is stability, and you won't really get that sort of stability with external rewards.
Right. In the case of a celebrity, let's say an actor just loves acting and they act to act, right? The autotelicity element. Well, even if, we witness their downfall, they can still go to, move to another country and do local theater plays. Because if what they enjoyed was the acting all along and not the attention, well, nothing should be taken away from them. So it's something extremely constant to do things for their own purpose. And I think I have the perfect analogy, and from everything you've said, I've kind of orchestrated this. Let's take economics, right? If you invest something, and this is what it is, happiness is an investment. It's long term, continuous, quite certain, and you do small bits every day, and it will pay off, and it constantly pays off. In fact, correct. But I would call pleasure seeking, which is kind of what we're trying to contrast happiness with, right? I would call it gambling, in fact. Because guess what? yes, that one celebrity is gonna be popular for 60 years and get the appraisal and whatever. And yeah, some gamblers are gonna win big. You know, you're gonna spin that slot thing, you're gonna get $3 million, and that's what's gonna happen. But the problem is, you will never know. And the smart thing to do with your money, the same way as the smart thing to do with your time or your resources, is to invest in happiness. In any case, we've ascertained that the unvariable reward, the certain, unvariable, and limitless reward of pursuing happiness kind of overshadows pleasure seeking or whatever you contrast with happiness seeking.
As, even though the highs won't be as high, they certainly won't. Because I think when when the highs are so high, it is a gamble. I think sprinkled throughout a happy person's life, some drugs, do have make highlights of like some weekends or whatever, but people that are happy acknowledge that that can only be temporary, and it has a place in their life as long as it doesn't become a gamble, right? As long as it doesn't affect their liver health or something, right? So it is limitless in the long term, but it has a cap as to what it can offer right now.
I think my problem would be putting the two things on the same axis, because if you take something like, I just don't like the fact that you could technically find a way to only use the things we usually seek for pleasure and justify them for a certainty of it only bringing you happiness. Okay, let's say, you would say cocaine, or, well, okay, let's just stick to that example for now. Well, let's say you're someone with who doesn't have an addictive personality, and whatever, all the factors are in place for you to know that this is not going to become a problem. It now becomes part of maximizing your happiness by doing cocaine once, right? Having that super high, and then never reaching the addiction part by not redoing it. One time won't really like hurt you, your body. So now, if we're putting both on the same axis, it seems as though if you utilize the tools that give you pleasure in a way where you just like cycle them through, right? It's usually addictions of pleasure that really hurt you, right? Not perhaps not doing it once, but if we're putting what happiness and pleasure brings on the same axis, it seems problematic to me.
I see what you're saying. So, like, if we're including them on the same axis and they bring the same sort of meaning, um, I, as a person with no tendency towards addiction, would just schedule my weekly cocaine on every Sunday, and that would make me happier because I get that high, and it doesn't ruin my life because I don't have an addiction. My first thing to say would be that I think the reason I don't do cocaine is because of the risk of addiction, right? Uh, I've never done it, and I probably never will because there is that risk of addiction. But what about alcohol, right? We're sort of at risk of addiction of alcohol, and we do it more often. But also, what this brings me towards is I feel like if we're dissociating pleasure from happiness completely, now happiness sort of in my mind tends to like it seems like we're able to redefine it as just meaning in life, just finding meaning.
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I wouldn't even call it a feeling. I would call it a state of mind, right? Maybe a certain satisfaction, but that's my definition. I'm trying to get at something, I don't know, deeper. What were you saying? What were you saying?
I would schedule my weekly
Oh, right,
cocaine
right. But do
Sunday.
people do say life is about balance, right? What can we say
Yeah,
about
people
that?
do say that.
No, but what can we say about that? Because in fact, well, the best example and the least extreme example is that the reason you don't do cocaine is because it's seen as like at a higher level, right? The reward is higher, the risk is higher. Well, alcohol is the same risk taking behavior, but at a lesser level, which is why you dare to engage in it. right? Let's take the least, for you, for your standards, the least risk taking behavior that still enters in the same realm, right? Eating sweets, right? You could live a perfectly happy life without doing it at all. And in fact, it is, part of pleasure seeking, because we're not, as humans, we're not even supposed to really have access to processed sugar. But you integrate it in your life in moderation, because you won't have any problems with food. And it seems to me that if we were to ask the following question, which is very, simplistic, but let's still ask it. Can two people live a perfectly happy life with consuming sweets on a regular basis, but in a balanced way as to not become addicted or have health problems relating to it, and not consuming sweets?
It probably depends on the people's personalities, but now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think I would go to the extreme as to say that a person, well, a person could probably live a happy life without any, it's hard to say, without any pleasure. Because it's so integrated into our life and we have so many things that give us pleasure in the forms of food or entertainment or drugs, and we feel like we live pretty happy lives. It's hard to imagine a person with actually no pleasurable stimuli leading a happy life. What do you think?
It's hard for me to say, because I think to a certain degree, doing things that make you happy also bring you pleasure, but it seems to me as though it's not in the same way. That's my intuition, right? Spending time with a significant other, is that pleasurable? To me, I get pleasure from conversations. Would you ever call a conversation a cheap way to pleasure seek? A hedonistic activity? Could that even be called that?
Right, I don't think so.
All right, conversations may be the simple things in life. And while it does, I cannot say that a conversation isn't pleasurable to me. It's also a big part of what could bring me happiness, right? Creating bonds with other humans, that is very important to me. So, but, maybe we can use the classical philosophical distinction of higher and lower pleasures. I don't like it, because then you would have to set a very clear boundary. But I mean, if I were to define that boundary, it would be the things that bring happiness are the higher pleasures, and the things that don't, that bring only pleasure, are the lower pleasures. But I don't like that.
Hmm. But I think the answer to my question that you brought up sort of is that it's impossible to lead a life without pleasurable stimuli, almost, right? Unless we imagine a like a edge case scenario where you're deprived of everything. People find pleasure in pretty much anything. Just the food that you eat, even if it's not that good, when you're hungry, it makes you happy. But it it's in no way bad for you. Bonds with other people, another basic form of pleasure you get that also brings you happiness. So there is some overlap in the activities you can do to find both happiness and pleasure at the same time.
Yeah, I wish we could just say that, the the slave example, someone who is completely deprived of kind of decision making, or maybe we can refer to the myth of Sisyphus. And what that is someone who is, well,
Condemned.
yeah, condemned by the gods to roll a boulder and having it roll back from the mountain every single day, and the only thing that he does is roll that boulder up. And the conclusion by Camus is he finds pleasure. And what's the word pleasure? Happiness? I don't know. I don't remember.
That Camus uses? I can't quote him, sorry.
Yeah, but something is found in the enjoyment of the small things, the everyday routine, the fact that he accomplishes an everyday task. And I think, in fact, instinctually, that example I really like for happiness. It's mostly like being satisfied with the routine and maybe the human condition. But Sisyphus has a goal, an everyday goal, which we would call a routine, right? Get up, brush your teeth, right? Expand that to whatever you do. Hopefully, brush your teeth, please. And For him, it's rolling a boulder. And as much as we get up and do our job for 8 hours a day, for those who are employed, he does too. And he finds happiness in it. Again, I forget the reasons, unfortunately. I would love to quote that, but there is something to be said about that. But let's move on to the next point ChatGPT brings us, because we're only on point 3, and it actually predicts our conversation quite well. The nature of pleasure. Is happiness solely related to pleasure and positive experiences, or does it encompass a broader range of emotions and life circumstances? Discuss the interplay between pleasure, contentment, and overall life satisfaction.
Okay. I think it's something we covered, but it's a good point to like have a checkpoint to talk about what we think so far. So pleasure is something that's distinct from happiness, but when you're seeking happiness, you will encounter activities that also bring you pleasure. Certainly.
I don't know if that's our conclusion, because you said a life of happiness cannot be devoid of pleasure, because every meal you eat, by fulfilling your hunger, it pleasures you, even if it's not good. Isn't that what you said? You would find, in the sense that you would end up finding pleasure from the bread crust.
Yeah, but what I just said is that it's distinct from pleasure is distinct from happiness, but you will certainly find pleasure in the things that bring you happiness also.
Yeah, but that kind of, it seems to me as though you're saying that you could not
Have pleasure?
find pleasure in the things that bring you happiness.
Okay, I guess you will have pleasure, but it's not necessary, is what we're saying.
Is
Well,
it what we're
wait,
saying?
wait.
I don't know. Is it what you're saying? The pleasure thing. If you know what I would find easier is to kind of define happiness in all the ways that I want to define it. Maybe we do it through the prompt by ignoring point 3, and then kind of sprinkling pleasure around that. We can try. Okay, so point 4 is external factors versus internal factors, which is a very good prediction of what we're going to talk about. What role do external circumstances such as wealth, success, and relationships play in determining one's happiness? How do internal factors such as mindset, gratitude, and personal values contribute to overall happiness? Explore the balance between external and internal influences. What I would say about that is, okay, the 3 examples here are wealth, success, and relationships. And I think it's not, external factors are important because they're a reflection of what we did every day, right? I don't think being wealthy in the sense that you won the lottery and had $3 million will make you as happy as having, as I said, gotten up at 6 a.m. and done your job for all these years, invested in this, and this, and done all the routine of the person who you want to be, right? The 1 year from now approach. In a year, how much money do I want to have made? What do I want to have accomplished for that? I think it's through the actions that mirror our ideal self, and having done them for an extended period of time, that makes it kind of happiness instead of just pleasure. A $3 million made after a hard 30-year career doesn't bring the same happiness as $3 million won in a lottery. And the $3 million to me would be all the days you got up at 6 a.m. without wanting to and worked your off, and not, oh, I can buy 8-ply toilet paper. You understand? And so external factors in that sense aren't useful or happiness inducing by themselves. None of them are. Health, success, interpersonal relationships, none of them are inherently. But what you did to attain them is. And in fact, unfortunately, here in the examples, it says wealth and then also relationships in the same sentence. Well, relationships are a very different thing, but I think the same thing can be applied. If we go back to your actor example, I mean, having those fans, just walking up to you and being, oh, I'm such a fan, can I take a picture? That's kind of an ego booster, right? That's just a thing that, okay, you saw it, kind of gives you that boost, like, oh, I'm important, right? But inherently, it doesn't have any value in itself. But those, those friends, though, those long-term friends that you made, every time you hung out with them, every time they helped you out when you were in trouble, every time you did, those are the memories. Those are the things that, well, bring happiness, simply put. And in fact, that brings me to an example. Maybe imagine a person who is happy and then they lose all their memories, but they keep obviously the same things as they had before. Both, well, I guess the internal things would go away in a way, because the ongoings of your mind, your personal values, your mindset, your gratitude, that kind of goes away. But so it isolates us to external factors. It's a good example for external factors. You still have the same friends, the same family, the same wealth. Could you go from being happy to being unhappy after losing all your memory? I would definitely argue that yes.
Probably. I think it's hard for me to talk about. I don't know if I can picture that and imagine me having lost all my memories, but I think you're right. I think a lot of what makes someone happy is, let's say, the pride in, or like the fulfillment you feel in knowing that you worked for something and you attained it. Wealth you got because you worked hard for it, and you think you're a good person and you think you work hard and you're fulfilled and happy because of that. Your success you got because you worked hard. Your relationships, you're a kind person and you know that deeply, and you know you deserve those things. I think when people have things from the lottery, maybe some people don't dramatize dramatize it and like feel fine about it, but I feel like I would find a way to make myself feel guilty, where I'd keep a lot of it for myself, but I would want to give it away to charity because I would feel bad keeping it all for myself, or at least use it on my loved ones instead of myself, because I wouldn't feel like I deserved it.
I mean, honestly, that doesn't really relate to that. You keeping the money or giving it away, it doesn't really mean anything. You could, in fact, the things that you accomplish with that money could make you happier if you were to. I don't believe in the whole charity thing, but whatever. Let's let's move on to other things. The pursuit of meaning. Is there a connection between happiness and finding meaning in life? Discuss the relationship between leading a purposeful life and experiencing lasting happiness.
ChatGPT is me.
Wow, this is a pretty good prompt. Meaning of life. For me, the answer of the meaning of life is quite easy. It's just to live, right? And I think what we've kind of determined for now is, if you do, I guess, live well is how I would qualify, not seeking happiness, but working. Well, it's not even working towards happiness, because I don't think that kind of puts it as though it's an end goal, but it should be something constant. And I thought about the following. I was looking at someone who was kind of overweight in the gym, and I was thinking about how he feels right now, and he looked a little bit insecure. And I wanted to think to myself, I wanted to like straight up go up to him. Okay, these are the things that happen in my mind, but I wanted to go up to him and say, look, don't you understand that you are the same person as you will be in 2 years when you reach your fitness goals and look the best that you've ever looked? Don't you understand that the mere fact of going to the gym is already more than you did before, and therefore that got you to, this point where you're unsatisfied with your body? And there's this big thing about long-term accomplishments where, to me, do you set a certain, that's the thing. You regress to pleasure seeking when you will only be happy when you have the body you want, right? And it's the same thing for a hard worker, right? If your end goal is the big money, well, obviously you're not going to be very happy with what you do every day, blah blah blah. But what I mean is, the first day you get up at 6 a.m. and have a productive day at work, and you look back and you're like, okay, if I had this day at work every single day for the next year, I would be extremely satisfied with myself and very happy in a year with me, right? Well, obviously you shouldn't use that as, a way to wiggle out of not doing it the next day, or well, I'm already the person that I want to be. I'm satisfied with myself. I can now cool down and stop working for it. No, no, no. You should just use it as though I felt this feeling and I'm going to seek it again. Because if you truly understand how to be fulfilled by, the small steps that you take every day, that's how you define happiness, the routine, the perfect routine of, you looking back on your year, blah, 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 everything we defined earlier. And part of that is you going to the gym. Let's say you put that in your routine. You should enjoy every moment that you are there because you already did what the ideal you does. The you in a year is going to have abs, but he's still just going to go to the gym. The only difference between you in a year and you now is that in a year you will have done it for a year. But then if that's the value, the additional value, and if that's when you postpone your happiness to, that means that you have to set a kind of a limit, right? What was the limit? A year in a gym? Is that what makes you happy? Okay. Well, why not 363 days, right? Okay. If it's not time, then it's a fitness goal, right? Having abs? Okay. Well, first of all, again, that kind of regresses to the things we were talking about, pleasure, right? That's fleeting, that's variable. What if you, I don't know, set a goal for a certain time and then you had an injury and you can't, do your crunches anymore, whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, your whole discussion of gym, a person that's overweight, going to the gym and being able to be happy makes me think of something I thought of earlier. I think that you can definitely be happy when you're at peace with yourself and you found meaning and you're doing the things you know you should be doing before you get any of that extrinsic reward. And I think that's a good argument for the autotelic part of happiness that we were talking about. It can be in anything. I'm pretty sure that a successful person, a happy person that's leading a good life was happy and, feeling accomplished, feeling secure before they were rich, right? Because to get rich, let's say someone had to develop a routine where they work hard and they know they work harder than everybody. And some people that are working less hard than them are richer than them, but they feel so secure in their strategy that they're happy from the beginning because they know that will lead them somewhere and that's how they want to be spending their life. So even before they get rich, they have the reward that happiness can bring, which is, you know, less intense, not of the same type and less intense than the pleasure you get from being rich, I guess. But it's not of the same type and it's more lasting. And it's a sort of feeling of accomplishment and of meaning in your life that you know you're doing the right thing. And yeah, I think it's a good example of people being happy even without success because they know success is coming, or that they know they don't need success to, or whatever, however success is defined in terms of external rewards to be happy.
Right. So if we were to take again the parallel between the meaning of life and and happiness, it would be the meaning of life would be kind of the guiding point of happiness, correct?
Expand on that.
Once you've found the meaning of life, everything that will eventually that will make you happy is the thing that is directed towards the meaning of life, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, that's kind of loose and I didn't say much by that, but what I wanted to say is I wanted to bring this example. And if, we're big on this, if you set a time limit, then you must justify to me why it's not 10% earlier or 10% later than that, correct? Like, okay, after a year of doing this perfect routine of the ideal me, I will be happy. Okay, well, why isn't it 2 years? Why isn't it 30 days? So what I would say is, if you were very thoughtful about the meaning of life and you think you've determined it, and let's say you even did, again, the way to ascertain that I will not expand on, but let's say you did. What do you think? Do you think someone could be happy the first day they do that perfect routine? Let's say they absolutely, they're a couch potato, not productive at work, whatever. The next day, they understand, I've been thinking about this. I know how to make myself happy, and I will do it, in fact. And they do all these things that are hard, they're not pleasurable, but, they go to the gym for the first time. They wake up early for the first time, not in that order. They go to work and do what is asked of them and more for 8 hours straight for the first time. They eat well. The entire day isn't very pleasurable to them. But, I've had these turning points where I was like, oh, let's revolutionize this. Tomorrow I'm going to start running, whatever. I feel quite satisfied with myself in the evening. And I mean, I would dare call that happiness. So wouldn't you say, well, we've been talking about these long-term things being part of happiness instead of quick ones, and now I'm bringing the one day example. I don't think it takes away anything from it, because the things you did, right? You wake up early to have more time in your day and to set a habit to always have more time in your day. You work hard because it will build your fortune and your skill set for the long term. You go to the gym, guess what? That day isn't going to change your body one bit. It's going to change it 0.001%. You're never going to notice it. But you did it for one day, and in a year, you will have done it for a year. Right? So everything is kind of long term, but could you still be happy on perfect day number one?
I would actually disagree. I don't think so. I think that the happiness that comes from that is from the assumption or the hope that that day is going to be emulated in the next year of your life or in the next rest of your life. I think it is real, but it's only partly real, because you can feel secure about that day and know that that day was well spent. But the happiness comes from the fact that you think you're going to do that the next day. I think when we've both had like phases where we're like very hyped on getting our lives together and going running tomorrow and going to the gym or whatever. And there have been times that that's been done, and over the next weeks and months, our lives have improved. But there have been times where some habits or some things change for a day, and then you don't have the willpower or you're lazy the next day and it doesn't happen. And I think ultimately you don't feel so good about that one day. In the moment, you do feel good, but perhaps only because you assume you're going to be doing that for the rest of your life. That's going to be your routine now. I think true happiness comes from, a track record of doing that reliably.
Okay, but if you were to set the specific way in which we define happiness, it would then mean not only doing the perfect day, right? Is what we will call it, but also being certain that you will be able to reproduce the perfect day.
I guess why not? Why not? Because it needs to be sustainable.
Well, your certainty will never really be certain, is what I'm saying. Okay, well, let's say if you define happiness as leading days the ideal you would lead, and then also knowing, in quotes, that you can reproduce that day. Okay, I'm okay with that. But the problem is, for me to know that I can reproduce that day, I would have to do it for maybe a few days or a week, right? Okay, I've been running for a month or maybe 2 months. And in fact, okay, let's say that's all it takes for me to be the perfect me, right? Running. I do it for 2 months. According to your definition, I would be happy the moment, well, according to my definition, let's start with that. I would be happy for the entire 2 months, because every day is the perfect day. Those 2 months, I am satisfied and happy with myself. According to your definition, it is only when I get the certainty that I can reproduce it. So let's say, I don't know, a month and 1 week, because it took me 3 weeks to know for certain I can reproduce it. But the problem with that is, guess what? Real life example, I get injured and I stop for a month and a half, and then I cannot start back. So that certainty, well, obviously, yeah, it's the interference of a certain like external factor. And you would like to say that certainty would lead me to then start running again. But guess what? I have to go through the hardship of starting running again, which is harder than continuing to run. So you've developed the confidence that you can maintain something that you've already started. But have you developed the confidence that you can restart it? Because that's quite necessary in life. There are pauses from your perfect days, unfortunate ones.
Yeah, I think restricting it to one activity sort of makes my definition look worse. But what I would say to that is that I thought of that, right? You get injured, you can't run anymore. I think the point is not so much about running. More about it's less about leading the perfect day, because you'll never practically never lead the perfect day. Or if you do, you'll just get lucky one day and you will. Because circumstances always change. I think it's not about leading the perfect day, it's about leading the best day you can lead. So if you can't run that day, you're gonna bike, treadmill. You're gonna stay inside and do stretches. You're gonna adapt and do the best you can. So I guess happiness and leading a good life is knowing that you're doing the most you can, and less about like specific activities.
I really wanted to restrict it, and it seems like we're broadening it instead. Maybe the other things in my life were quite set up in a way where I was happy with them, and the reason I used the example about running specifically is because that was kind of the missing piece for me. And in that sense, it's not even that hypothetical an example. And the moment I stopped, right, because of the injury, let's say the meaning of life, right, the part of the meaning of life, which is our guiding point for happiness, was to stay in shape, maybe maintain the vessel through which I experience life in the best shape I can. Well, I understand that for you, that would mean, let's say, the moment I have the injury is to, I don't know, go swimming, maybe, if that doesn't hurt. But again, a leg injury is so limiting. And again, it seems like I'm kind of capitalizing on my example only. But there are things like that. Let's say circumstances change drastically in a way where it's very hard to maintain the things that you think are aligned with your goal in life. So let's say you were doing that long-term thing, that constant investment, constant payout thing of having a life partner, and something changes, right? Maybe you didn't know them fully, and circumstances change around their life, or maybe they take a career decision that compromises what happens with you, and you've been putting in all that emotional work for 2 years, and you've been doing the best you can. Well, you lose them, right? What is the new thing? What is the new part of your perfect day? Trying to rebuild that with someone else? I mean, that is very hard, in a new environment. Maybe how would you then be satisfied with the day after the breakup if you meet enough people and explore enough potential new relationships? Is that how you define? Like circumstances changes my point.
I guess I'm not sure exactly what your point is, because it's harder for someone that's just broken up with a long term partner, but for the injury, let's say, I guess it changes temporarily, but you adapt and you get something else, because you can't just say like someone for whom the perfect day includes running loses both his legs, right? He can't move them anymore or something. He will find a way to be happy. Hopefully, I hope for that person that they do. That's why I wanted to define it as doing the best you can within the circumstances. I think obviously and definitely people are gonna get sad, sort of mind boggled over an injury or a breakup for a while, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter periods of time. But people find ways to adapt, and their goal is leading the best day they can, not necessarily the best day.
Here's what I would like to say, because I guess my point wasn't clear in the last statement I made, but here's my point. With your standards of reaching happiness, right? It's hard to imagine what the person for whom the circumstances have changed could do to be happy the day after those circumstances have changed. For me, it's quite clear. For me, let's say you are happy with running in your life. Well, the only way you will get back that is by, sitting out the next month and recovering your injury fully, right? So you will be happy the very next day of not running, because the only way you're getting back to running is you're maximizing what you're doing for your your constant goal, and is by sitting it out. Or another example with the significant other.
Wait, but what if the person loses their legs?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not in alignment with their their goal in life to run. It's not. I mean, yeah, they found pleasure in running, whatever. But I'm saying it's to just to maintain their general health or whatever fitness goals, or they like cardio, so they will find something else.
But the person that's injured is fine the day after because they're just gonna wait out a month and then not be injured anymore.
Yeah, I guess I'd say that. Yeah, because they're maximizing getting back to. Well, okay, maybe it would be some form of upper body cardio if cardio is what makes you happy. Maybe let's just move to the significant other example, and we'll see how that works with that. The only way they would be getting back to building the long term relationship goal of that fulfills us and whatever is by having a successful date, right? Just finding a new date person to date and putting their all into that date.
I
But
I don't think it's so clear cut. I think that you know I don't have. If I did, I guess that would be great because I would know. But I don't have a set of criteria that I need in my day or I need in my weekly or monthly routine to have checked off, and I know that I'll be happy if I have those. I need some cardio. I need a relationship. I need a significant other necessarily. I think people adapt so well that even if a person can't run, maybe they won't even do upper body cardio. They'll find something else that they like, or if they're not in a relationship, maybe that's good from time to time for someone to not be in a relationship. To spend some time alone.
yeah, but that's because spending that time alone, well, supposedly, I don't believe in time alone, but supposedly it's the best thing that will get them back to being able to have the relationship. A better thing than trying to go out and date for building a relationship for them is literally to take time for themselves. So what I'm saying is they will rebuild towards those goals. And again, yeah, I've said, I've defined happiness as running and dating. Okay, that's unreasonable. What I mean by that is something larger. For example, if your goal in life is to maintain the vessel through which you experience life in the best health possible, in the best fitness condition, right? Is that likely? Is that reasonable for you? That's something that someone could have as a goal in life?
That's someone that most people should have, yeah, and do.
I hope so. So now, if I were to become paraplegic, oh wait, is that only legs? Whatever, the four members. I personally don't quadriplegic. I don't think I would find happiness because something that goes into my day and my goal in life is to maintain my body.
Well, okay, maybe that's a supposition for you, but I'm sure there's stories about people becoming quadriplegic and still being happy because I think it's more flexible than that. I think I agree with you to some extent, uh, in the sense that the categories of things can be broader, right? It can be fitness in general. So if I lose my legs, I'll be the best muscle upper you ever know. I'll lose like 40% of my body weight. It'll be way easier, right? I'll find like some happiness in that. The categories are broader, maybe. If it's not in a relationship currently that I find meaning, it's through friendships and getting closer with my friends. I think the categories can be broad and you adapt in those categories, but I'm not sure about becoming quadriplegic. There are stories about people that become happy, and I don't know if I could because physical activity is such a big part of my life.
Right, but then let's just not discount or just not take off the table rethinking life values, right? I mean, okay, with what I have present now, my life goals are partly keeping the vessel in the best health possible. This.
Oh, I'm just going to work on the old vessel.
But obviously, if I lose certain parts of that vessel, it will be much harder, and I may have to rethink life values. I mean, I would like to find an example for it to make it easier for us to make that comparison with something that we could lose or have lost, the ability to love. I don't know. Maybe that's a little bit cheesy.
Is that us?
Yeah, me. That's me
Okay,
specifically.
okay.
Don't believe what I say. You know who I'm referring to. So, okay, let's go. Actually, this is a pretty good example, and it kind of follows our train of thought. Point 7, the hedonic treadmill. Explore the concept of the hedonic treadmill, which suggests that humans adapt to positive and negative life events and eventually return to a baseline level of happiness. Discuss the implications of this theory to the pursuit of lasting happiness. And it looks by your face that you are unfamiliar with this, but it simply means
I
that
mean, is that the hedonic treadmill?
I don't know. I don't know the terminology, but
Okay.
I understand the concept, and it's simply that whatever your life is, whatever your routine is, it becomes your new baseline. The reason that Elon Musk has hundreds of millions of dollars and still actually billions, right, and still does what he does every
I don't know
day
numbers.
is because making that extra 100 millions to him is make for you to make $1,000, right? Our life becomes our baseline essentially, and that's all it means. So the same thing for the slave, right? The Socratic example of a slave able to be happy is just as long as the things that align with his life values are fulfilled, it doesn't matter if he has to eat breadcrumbs or whatever.
So is that to say that to add to the flexibility and adaptability of the human condition, a slave perhaps can be as happy as Elon Musk, but Elon Musk just requires much bigger rewards and stimuli to be happy than the slave. And we're somewhere in between.
Yeah, and maybe it's to also take away from pleasure because again, right, the daily cocaine user will simply need double the dose in 3 months. And pleasure is kind of this pitfall. I don't know if I'm using the word right, but where you again, yeah, whatever you experience daily becomes your new baseline. And where do you see? Well, that's actually a very good point
I
that
think
we
it's a
didn't
good
even
point
add. We
to say
didn't
that.
add, yeah.
Oh, wait, I was just going to say, I think what's important is not the quantity of pleasure, is just the presence of pleasure, right? Because if you keep pleasure at a minimum, and you can be a I don't know, a happy poor person.
Yeah, and I feel like it's I don't know how I didn't mention this, but yeah, the presence of pleasure. But I mean, obviously, if you say not the quantity, but the presence of pleasure, well, okay, keep up in the cocaine dose, and you will die happy. But I think what's more is that you don't develop a tolerance to things that make you happy, right? The work, the meeting with your friends, right? The party, the going to the restaurant, going out with your friends on day one. Well, I would say, let's say a year into knowing them, just because we're talking long term relationship stuff. 4 years into knowing them, it should, all in all, bring you the same pleasure.
Yeah. So I think our conclusion, final, and this is what we think definitely, is that you should the goal to being happy is just to keep pleasure at an absolute minimum. We've solved it.
Yeah, the long term thing is really, really for me, it's the biggest point. Okay, we have 3 more points in ChatGPT, but we're gonna kind of start concluding here. But what I would say, and what I was gonna say at the beginning of the episode anyway, is anything long term. Whenever you take an example, anything long term is simply better. It's better to try to build a long-term relationships and the consequences that will have than fleetingly meeting new people.
So it's the long term aspect. It's better to eat healthy food in the long term because it gets your body healthy instead of just having good food, really good food right now, which brings you reward. But in the long term, knowing that you're eating healthy food, which also brings you pleasure because we're humans and we like to eat, is better. And that's happiness.
Yeah, it brings you less pleasure, I feel, but it's not devoid of pleasure. And maybe even the first day, right? Like chicken and broccoli. Well, even that's just a bad example because there's a way to eat perfectly healthy and perfectly good, but guess what? To your dopamine receptors, it will never be as good as the McDonald's is, right? There's a difference between good healthy food and good unhealthy food. But
Although chicken and broccoli is fire.
yeah, Well, no, no, not the bodybuilder way, where it's just white, white rice, steamed broccoli. There's a way to find a balance in that, and it's the same thing. Well, yeah, it's just not devoid of pleasure, but it's a constant pleasure, and it's not a big peak in pleasure. Oh, here actually, point A is the role of relationships. Well, essentially, actually, what I wanted to ascertain is anything that you think builds on your long term and is aligned with your life values is what you will bring you happiness. And we're discussing here. Maybe we've run into a certain problem, but I think people mystify happiness a lot, and I don't think it's that deep. I truly don't. I think the way I define it, I think it's anything long term that is conducive to your life goals. Anything wrong with that?
Yeah, I don't think so. And I think that there's a lot of overlap with the meaning, and I don't have a problem with that either. That happiness and meaning have an overlap so big.
The big conundrum, obviously, here being the philosophical mystery of what are your life goals? What do you think those are? I think that's to a certain degree personal. I think something as humans we might have for the majority is to, ensure the survival of our species. Maybe for that, in the way we've set up society, would be a long term partner. Maybe that would be a part of happiness for most, I would say. Maybe there are some generalizable things. So I said life meaning and long term. Well, yeah, long term is anything that enters your life meaning, because your life meaning isn't going to be, well, hopefully, I really hope so, isn't going to be make $1 million. Wow. Well, okay, if you qualify that as your life meaning, well, maybe you should, I don't know, read any philosophy book or think about it, because that's what we've discussed in the beginning of the episode. But if it's, to be not limited wealth wise and to be a hard worker, well, then that's something I can relate to, and that's something that's achievable. And again, long term.
Yeah, I think that's that's really good, and I can find no counterexample in my life. For example, you know, what makes me happy is, let's say, playing soccer. And playing soccer, one, develops long term relationships with the people I play with. You bond with your teammates, you develop a sort of chemistry on field, you have fun moments on field, and you also run and work out. Then I've been trying to play some instruments. I think in life I want to be more creative and be able to put stuff out there and be able to vehiculate my ideas to others. And I think being creative is going to help me with that. And I enjoy doing that. And it's part of my, life meaning. It's something I want to do with my life. And it's all long term. I think you can't have an overload of pleasure for the reason we discussed before. But every example I take of something I do that makes me happy is involved with my life meaning and is long term. Studying psychology because I want to help people. Being in my job right now, I work with people and I help people. I think those are good criteria to have for happiness.
Yeah, I think in a way, if we were to synthesize what we've said for now, it's sacrificing fleeting and variable pleasure, because it will require sacrifice, right? At certain points, you could go out with your friends some of those nights and drink alcohol and have fun, or you could choose to spend that time with your girlfriend, which will in turn, build a stronger relationship and maybe lead to an eventual marriage, right? It's an oversimplification, but it will require sacrifice. And the way we've defined that sacrifice, because that's something that needs to be addressed, right? Sacrifice for happiness. And it's to sacrifice the peaks of pleasure you could receive for the constant and certain, well, actually, is it certain? Well, yeah, certain, because if you've aligned your life values well, if it's, spending time with a significant other, the autotelic goal of spending time with a significant other will be accomplished in doing that. Again, I hate saying it the way that I say it, but I have to say it, right?
Yeah, yeah. That reflection you've just made me think that we, I guess, haven't considered or talked about people that, well, we sort of talked about the slave condition, where like people that have so little pleasure in their lives and have a lot of suffering actually, how are they able to find happiness? I guess like doing the best with the situation they have, maybe.
It's kind of what it is. I The same way I don't discount a quadriplegic being able to find happiness, I do not discount that. In the same way, well, when we talked about the hedonistic treadmill, the hedonic treadmill or whatever, you can use any of those examples. It's finding life goals for what you have, for what you are able to do, what you are able to do with your day, and it's to fulfill those things with your routine, right? If you don't have any teeth, brushing your teeth will not be part of that. And if that's what makes me happy, in a way, sometimes even that's a pretty good example, surprisingly. Some of those nights, when you come back, you're tired, you're already laying in your bed before the bedtime because but you are tired and you're planning like, oh yeah, I'm gonna get up and brush my teeth and then go back to bed, and then you just don't do it. Well, and it's okay to sometimes to skip out on it, but if you do it enough, it will become problematic. And that's what it is. It's the sacrifice of, I could stay in the comfort of my bed, or I could do this thing that will for sure be conducive to my goals of not having rotten teeth.
Yeah. Are we wrapping up?
3 points. I haven't read them. Maybe we'll just go through them very quickly. But the role of relationships, investigate the significance of social connections and relationships in cultivating happiness, discuss the impact of friendships, family, romantic partnership, and community involvement and overall well-being.
I think that's so broad that it's a subject for another video. I think we sort of assumed, I said video, we're doing podcasts. We sort of assumed that it's sort of a worthwhile, sort of intrinsic, sort of true to human goal to have those relationships. I don't know if we can talk about it that much if we don't want to talk for another hour.
I was going to quickly say that for me, at the very least, it's kind of everything. Of course, there are some material things that don't have anything to do with that.
So unlike you to say that.
I know, like building your body, that doesn't have anything to do with a relationship with others. But once you get past all the, let's say, getting your mind right, that could maybe go into your life purpose. But all the other things is friendships, relationships is a little bit kind of encompasses maybe 60% of what I would value in life. But again, that's just me, and maybe
I definitely agree. Yeah, I think it's a big part. I think most jobs is just doing stuff for other people to make other people's lives better too.
Yeah, but again, maybe, and it will be an ambitious one, but maybe the meaning of life could be another episode, and that would we've kind of introduced it in this episode as being the guiding point of what will determine your happiness. But yeah, no, that would be a good episode. Okay, number 9, happiness and mental health. Okay, I'm gonna skip that one because mental health comes with happiness seeking, and that's obvious. And if you simply do the things that you're supposed to do, you're gonna be happy. Happiness in everyday life. Share practical tips and strategies for fostering happiness in everyday life. Well, we do have a blog, but we're not a blogger type podcast. So no, we're not going to share tips to be happy in everyday life. We've laid it out for you. Find your life purpose. Do it.
These were our thoughts. Then continue the thoughts in your head and with us, perhaps,
and
by commenting
in our emails,
below.
Please.
Emailing.
Yeah, thank you. So find your life purpose. Do it every day. Make sacrifices for it because they will be necessary, and the peaks of pleasure are not worth it. It seems we've come to the figured it out rating. And I think there's only one hang up I have, right? Because figured it out is kind of a combination of how much do we agree on it at the end of the episode and how much we think that the overall subject was well concluded, right? The findings we've made. And I think there's only one hang up we have is at what moment are we allowed to say we're happy? Because for me, it was the instant we become our ideal self. And that can be done on day one, right? Having the abs doesn't have the same value as having gone to the gym today. right? And again, I'm giving an arbitrary amount of time as well. Like I'm saying a day. Well, what if now, you could use that against me? What if now, the very minute you're being your ideal self, you're allowed to be happy? Well, okay, let's not exaggerate, but if you do give me the day separation thing, right? Do you still think that being happy requires doing the things that your ideal self would do, and then also being certain you can maintain them?
I still think so. I think it takes sort of a track record of knowing that you're. It takes self confidence. It takes a feeling of accomplishment and knowing that you've done those things and you can reliably do those things.
Well, it's not you've done those things and you can reliably do them. It's you can reliably do them, and the proof you have of that is that you have done them.
Yeah, or at least as you specified earlier, it's not doing specific things. I think it's being assiduous and doing the best you can, at least.
Well, that was kind of unclear. So, on both of our parts. So, I think that would definitely take away from the figured it out rating, but I also think,
We agreed on a lot too.
yeah, and honestly, the happiness part is also, it seems to me, the easy part, because now, and we've kind of tasked everyone who is set to believe our conclusions on happiness with the hardest part, and it's the meaning of life. And that's next episode. It's not, but we'll see. We'll
A
see.
future episode.
A future episode. But this, what I just said, is what allows me to say that I would be comfortable with an 8 or a 9.
Right. I would
Because this is the easy part, realistically.
I would sit at an 8. Yeah, there was a lot of agreement between us. I think it's betwixt us. There was a lot of not sponsored, but also I think
Twix is better.
but also I think we sort of stumbled at some points. So
That's
I think
another episode.
8 is better.
Left versus right Twix. 8 is better. I agree. We can do 8 because we can do 8 because 9 is kind of what we're gonna label our perfect episodes, right? Because we won't know a 10 until we know a 10.
Right.
And the 8 is kind of the part where are you allowed to say I'm happy?
Yeah, and Chris is known to be humble, so a 9 is where we'll stick out for most good episodes. And now it'll be an 8.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to our 1 or something like that, because we've had a 5, but it was only because of, some special guest.
Some medical professional.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to it. Okay. So it's been the Thinkin Bros. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for listening. Visit thinkinbros.com for more information. I'm Chris.
And I'm Alex.
And we'll see you next week.
See ya.